Hello, radiant Leo soul, welcome. Let me ask you something that may stop you for a moment. What if you didn't find this video, but it found you? This is not just another horoscope reading. This is a cosmic checkpoint. If you've landed here on May 26, 2025, or even stumbled across this message days or weeks later, I truly believe it's because a deeper part of your soul has already heard the whisper. That whisper that says, something is shifting. You're not meant to stay where you are. Welcome to Eternal Mindfulness, where every reading is more than prediction. It's a mirror, a key, and sometimes, a sacred push from the universe itself. This message today isn't random. In fact, nothing about your arrival here is accidental. Leo, you are ruled by the sun, and just like the sun, you were born to shine boldly, to warm hearts, to lead with soul. But even the brightest light goes through periods of eclipse. And lately, you may have felt like something inside you has been flickering, as if a part of your energy, your clarity, or even your confidence, has been quietly fading. It's okay. Because sometimes, a flicker isn't failure, it's the soul saying, pause. Realign. Prepare. Today's energy is powerful. The universe is aligning in ways that can only be described as life-altering, but only for those who are listening. If something in your spirit has been nudging you, if dreams have felt more vivid, or if you've caught yourself wondering, is this all there is? Then you're already receiving the call. A turning point is here. And if you let it, this day can become a doorway. We're going to go deep. Into your energy. Into the symbols. Into the divine nudges that keep circling your heart. We'll talk love, finances, health, purpose, and more than that, we'll talk truth. The kind of truth your higher self has been waiting to hear. But before we dive in, let me take a moment to say this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Thank you for your time, your trust, your presence. Every like, every comment, every share, and every subscription connects you more deeply to the Eternal Mindfulness family. And it's your support that allows these messages to continue flowing, from my spirit to yours. And trust me, Leo, you're going to want to stay with me until the very last moment of this reading. Because what's coming through today is not only powerful. It's sacred. It's bold. It's deeply personal. So tell me, my loyal Leo soul, what drew you here today? Whatever it was, I believe it wasn't just curiosity, it was destiny. Let's begin. When we speak of pain, especially the kind that lingers quietly in the corners of our heart, it's easy to fall into the belief that it was punishment, that it marked some sort of failure, weakness, or flaw in judgment. But what if that pain wasn't meant to break you, only to awaken you? Leo, you are ruled by the sun, the center of our solar system, the symbol of warmth, brilliance, and visibility. Yet even the sun experiences periods of eclipse. In the same way, you too must pass through moments of dimming, not to lose your power, but to rediscover it in its most essential, unshakable form. That is the lesson of this chapter, that real strength isn't about always standing tall, but knowing when to soften, when to sit with the ache, and when to gently let it go. The reverse 10 of Swords in today's reading is not a card of defeat, it's a quiet revolution. It whispers that the worst is already behind you. The swords that once pierced your thoughts, your pride, your trust, have now begun to loosen and fall. What remains is not the injury, but the space it left behind, space that can now be filled with something more aligned with who you're becoming. Pain was never the end game, it was the teacher that escorted you to the threshold of truth. Sometimes, healing doesn't come from figuring it all out, but from simply stopping the endless search for justification, for the person to blame, for the version of you that made that choice. From a deeper perspective of mindfulness, we can begin to see that suffering often arises not from the wound itself, but from our resistance to it, our urge to push it away, analyze it endlessly, or deny it ever existed. But what you resist persists. And what you gently observe begins to dissolve. This is the heart of what ancient teachings have long known, that suffering is not the enemy, clinging is. When you no longer cling to the story of the wound, you're no longer bound by it. That doesn't mean you forget what happened. It means you honor the path it carved and use that wisdom to choose differently now. Look back, Leo, but not with resentment. Look back with clarity. Not all detours were mistakes. Some were disguised redirections, not to delay your destiny, but to deepen your capacity to meet it fully. What you survived made you precise. It sharpened your discernment. And most of all, it taught you to listen, not to the noise outside, but to the truth inside. Today, allow yourself to be soft without shame. Let the roar of the lion quiet just long enough to hear the heartbeat beneath. That inner pulse carries a message: you are not broken, and you never were. The experiences that challenged your sense of control were not punishments from a chaotic universe, but invitations, asking you to shed what no longer served, to stop holding on to what hurt just because it once felt familiar. There is no need to go back to places that drained you just to prove something. You have nothing to prove. You don't need anyone's permission to rise. You don't need validation to step forward. You've earned your right to start again, not from scratch, but from experience. So today, if your heart feels the pull to release, to walk away, to close a chapter with peace rather than resentment, trust it. This is not a collapse. It's a sacred exhale. And it's telling you, with the quiet authority of the stars, that the time has come. There are moments in life when logic, no matter how refined, cannot carry us forward. It's not because logic has failed us, but because the path ahead isn't built with facts, it's made of feeling. Today, that path is softly unfolding before you, and while it might look unfamiliar, your intuition already recognizes it. For Leo, whose energy is usually bold, outward, and full of certainty, this moment may feel strangely subtle. But that is precisely why it's powerful. You are not meant to charge ahead right now, you are meant to listen. There is a quiet language moving through your day, a name you keep hearing, a symbol you keep noticing, a memory that returns uninvited. These aren't coincidences. They're repetitions from the universe, carefully placed so that even in the noise of life, you would hear the signal. The Page of Cups, the card that has arrived in your reading, is a gentle messenger. It doesn't shout, it nudges. It brings an invitation through softness, through daydreams, through an unexpected comment that makes your chest stir. The question is not whether the message is real, but whether you're willing to pause long enough to receive it. This is where the wisdom of presence becomes your compass. Not the kind of presence that demands you do something, but the kind that invites you to feel fully. If you find yourself torn between two options, unsure whether to stay, leave, speak up, or remain still, try asking this: which choice makes you feel more alive? Not safer, not more approved of, not more convenient, but more deeply and undeniably alive. That answer may come with a flutter of fear, and that's okay. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's knowing something is right even when fear tags along. In numerology, the number 5, active in your field today, is the vibration of change. It brings with it motion, curiosity, and yes, unpredictability. But it also brings liberation. It asks you to loosen your grip on what has been, and to lean slightly toward what might be. When you're too focused on staying grounded, you can miss the pull of the wind that's trying to lift you somewhere better. And Leo, you were never meant to live with your feet stuck in the past. You are a fire sign, ruled by the sun. You're meant to move toward light. In teachings that explore the nature of the mind, it's said that the truest knowing isn't born from thinking harder, it comes when you stop grasping. The moment you release your attachment to how something should go, the path becomes clearer. Intuition is like a still lake. When you're agitated, you stir the surface and distort the reflection. But when you're quiet, the water reveals everything. That stillness is available to you now, not as withdrawal, but as alignment. You may be tempted today to wait for more evidence before making a decision. But evidence is often retrospective. Clarity comes after we choose. Intuition asks for trust in the unseen, a deep inner bow to the part of you that already knows. Whether the insight comes through a person, an image, or a sudden impulse to act, don't dismiss it just because it doesn't arrive with a spreadsheet or a 5-step plan. You are not being called to calculate, you are being invited to feel your way forward. So let this be the moment you choose sensation over certainty, presence over perfection. The invitation is here, Leo. A subtle shift. A spark. A new door, slightly ajar. All that's left is for you to listen, and walk through. When life feels like it's on the edge of change, we often look outward for clarity, toward the balance in our accounts, the structure of our schedules, or the opinions of others. But the truth is, the most important shift begins quietly, internally, when we start to realize that the strategies we've used to survive may no longer be enough to help us thrive. Right now, Leo, you're standing at a threshold. And the question isn't whether you're ready for more, it's whether you're willing to let go of what no longer reflects your real values. Financially, the signals are subtle but clear. Something is beginning to move. Perhaps a side project that once felt like an afterthought now shows signs of potential. Maybe an unexpected repayment or small opportunity arrives, almost like the universe giving you a nudge. But here's the deeper message. This isn't just about money, it's about intention. In the same way that a tree doesn't absorb water without discernment, your energy, your time, your resources all deserve thoughtful direction. The call is to avoid overextension, not just in spending, but in how you chase validation through material outcomes. Abundance flows best where energy is focused, not scattered. In matters of health, the signals are even quieter, but they matter more than you might think. That dull ache, that fatigue you're brushing off, or that tightness in your gut after a stressful day, these are not just physical reactions. They are messages. Your body isn't a machine to be fixed when broken. It's an ecosystem of intelligence, and it's speaking to you. When you ignore what it's saying, when you power through without rest, overconsume caffeine, or skip simple rituals like drinking enough water, you create internal imbalance. Healing doesn't require complexity. Often, it's the smallest shifts: warm tea instead of sugar, an earlier bedtime, a breath taken before a reaction, that begin to return you to center. And then there's work, the place where so many of us measure worth and identity. If you've been feeling a gradual dullness, a loss of creative pulse, or even resentment toward what used to inspire you, don't ignore that. You're not failing, you're evolving. The discomfort you feel isn't laziness or confusion. It's clarity trying to rise. Ask yourself honestly, do I still find meaning here? Does this version of my career align with the life I want, or am I staying because it's familiar? Just like a river that's meant to flow, staying stagnant in a role or identity that no longer nourishes you will only create pressure. And pressure, over time, becomes pain. The Chariot card appearing now is significant. It doesn't just represent forward motion, it represents conscious direction. Not movement for the sake of escape, but movement rooted in inner alignment. The two horses depicted are often moving in opposite directions, and the rider must hold the reins with balanced strength. That's your task now, to notice what pulls you off course, and to steer gently but firmly toward the center line of your purpose. This is also where color becomes a quiet ally. Red ruby amplifies clarity and commitment. It sharpens your sense of knowing what you truly want. Olive green soothes the inner storms, bringing a sense of calm discernment when decisions feel overwhelming. These aren't superstitions, they are tools, reminders to return to yourself. And finally, protect your space. Not everything requires your response. Not every conversation deserves your energy. Negative environments, especially those soaked in comparison, gossip, or urgency, drain the very fire you need to rebuild. This is not about isolation, it's about discernment. Just as we cleanse the body, we must also be mindful of the company we keep and the narratives we engage in. The reset you're being called toward is not dramatic. It's steady, quiet, intentional. And it begins with the smallest yes to your own well-being, financially, physically, and professionally. Let that yes guide everything else. Love, when true, does not confuse you, it clarifies you. It doesn't shake your foundation, it reminds you that you've always had one. And in this current moment, Leo, you are being asked to examine your connections not from a place of longing or fear, but from presence. The truth is, relationships don't begin when two people meet. They begin much earlier, in the quiet places within us, where patterns form, where hopes take shape, and where we unconsciously decide what we're willing to accept in the name of connection. Today, something in that space is stirring. If you are in a relationship, this is a moment for honesty, not confrontation. It's time to soften the edges of pride, to place curiosity above defensiveness, and ask the questions that matter more than who's right. Are we still growing in the same direction? Are we responding to each other or reacting from old wounds? Sometimes, we bring the weight of past stories into present love, and it becomes impossible to see what's truly in front of us. Perhaps the tension you feel isn't about your partner at all. Perhaps it's a voice from your past saying, "Will you let yourself be loved this time without expecting it to disappear?" The moon reversed in your reading illuminates this perfectly. It's the lifting of fog, the clearing of projection. And paired with the lovers, it signals a moment of choice. Not just about who you love, but how you love. Will you engage with the familiar roles, or are you ready to meet another with fresh eyes and an open heart? This card combination invites you to return to love not as a transaction, but as a space where two whole beings choose, again and again, to see and be seen. For those who are single, this moment carries a quiet electricity. There may be someone hovering just outside your current awareness, perhaps not physically near, but vibrationally close. You might feel their presence before you know their name. You may catch a look from a stranger that feels oddly familiar, or have a dream that lingers long after waking. The point is not to chase it or force it, but to stay open. Attraction is not always loud. Often, it enters like a breath, gentle but unmistakable. In certain wisdom traditions, it's said that the other is always a mirror. The way we love another reveals how we've been taught to love ourselves. If love has felt heavy, like work or sacrifice, that may not be because love is hard. It may be because you learned to prove your worth by carrying what wasn't yours. But love, in its most aligned form, is not a burden. It is the freedom to become more of yourself beside someone who is also becoming. Today is a powerful moment to reflect on whether your current or emerging relationships allow that kind of expansion. Not whether they're perfect. Not whether they meet every expectation. But whether they awaken the best in you, the courage, the softness, the truth. If your heart flutters when you think of a particular person today, don't dismiss it. That sensation is not imagination, it's resonance. Something in you recognizes something in them. And that is always worth exploring, even gently. The most important relationship is always the one you have with your own soul. But when another soul shows up, not to complete you, but to remind you of who you already are, that's not a coincidence. That's a reunion. Let yourself be curious. Let yourself be seen. And if connection finds you today in an unexpected way, don't look away. Sometimes the universe speaks not through grand gestures, but through a glance held half a second too long. There are times when we can sense something shifting before we can name it. It begins not with an event, but with a quiet pressure rising inside, like a wave preparing to break. Leo, if you've been feeling that restless current beneath your usual rhythm, the sense that something within you is ready, but the how hasn't yet shown itself, you are not alone. That feeling is valid, and it's more than emotion. It's alignment calling your attention. Right now, with the Sun forming a harmonious trine with Uranus, cosmic forces are activating change from within. This isn't chaos, it's a natural release of potential. Uranus doesn't ask for permission. It asks for honesty. And when its energy flows with the Sun, your ruling celestial force, it doesn't whisper, it illuminates. You may be receiving unexpected insights, ideas that seem out of character, or impulses to make decisions you've postponed for too long. These are not distractions. They're inner truth surfacing through a crack in the armor of habit. When the Judgment card appears, as it does now, it signals a reckoning, not with guilt, but with clarity. It's the moment where we're called not to fix, but to rise. The past isn't here to haunt you, it's here to inform you. What choices have you postponed because fear disguised itself as logic? What dreams have you quietly packed away because timing never felt perfect? This is the energy of release, of self-reclamation. And like the lotus that blooms not in clear waters but in mud, your next becoming may arise from the very confusion you thought would hold you back. Instead of forcing answers, try this simple reflection. Write down 3 things you've been putting off, not because they don't matter, but because they do. Notice the emotion that surfaces as you name them. Then, write 3 possible outcomes if you took just one small action today. Not grand shifts, not resolutions, just momentum. And then, when this video ends, take the first step. Maybe that's a phone call. Maybe it's deleting something that drains your energy. Maybe it's speaking your truth without rehearsing it to perfection. The energy is here to support motion, but the initiation must come from you. This wave of transformation also touches the heart of your relationships, especially those tied to family. Connection isn't only about affection, it's about honesty, responsibility, and, at times, the courage to lead by softness. If there's been tension, unspoken distance, or roles you feel trapped inside, now is the time to gently re-enter those spaces with new awareness. Healing within a family system often begins not with dramatic breakthroughs, but with quiet acts of presence. A conversation started, a wall lowered, an old grievance no longer fed with silent judgment. The principle here is simple. When we stop resisting the pull of growth, we begin to flow with it. Just as rivers carve valleys through persistence, you too are carving a new internal landscape, through choice, awareness, and the willingness to show up. In certain teachings, it's said that insight without action is like a seed never watered. It holds potential, but never becomes form. The insight you feel now isn't meant to sit still. It's meant to reshape you, not into someone new, but into the fuller version of who you've always been. You may start noticing patterns of numbers, angel codes like 777 or 222. These aren't just aesthetic alignments, they are symbolic reflections of deeper truths. 777 is the completion of an old cycle. 222 offers the promise of balance and divine timing. When you see them, pause. Ask yourself what you're feeling in that moment. Often, these signs arrive as confirmation of a choice you haven't yet spoken aloud, but already made internally. This is not the time to retreat. It's the time to breathe in the edge of the unknown, and let it expand you. Growth doesn't always wait until we're ready, it waits until we're willing. And willingness, Leo, is already stirring in your spirit. If you've stayed with me until now, dear Leo, then I know something inside you has stirred. Not just curiosity, but recognition. Maybe it's been quiet for a long time, that inner voice whispering, you can't keep living on repeat. But today, something has shifted. This isn't just another day on the calendar. It's not just another message or another reading. It's a threshold. And standing here, on the edge of all you've known and all that's calling you forward, you already know. You're not the same person who pressed play a few minutes ago. You don't need anyone's permission to begin again. You don't need every piece figured out before you take the first step. All you need is the willingness to stop choosing comfort over growth. Because comfort might feel familiar, but it will never awaken the part of you that came here to shine. And that part, the bold, radiant, sovereign self, is rising now. Slowly, steadily, undeniably. Can you feel it? There will always be reasons to wait. There will always be someone who doesn't understand your vision, or a fear that says, not yet. But what if today is exactly the right moment? What if the signs you've been brushing off, the repetition, the synchronicities, the subtle tug in your heart, are not random, but sacred cues asking, are you ready? So I ask you now, what are you no longer willing to tolerate in your life? What would your days look like if you trusted your own inner wisdom more than the opinions outside you? And who could you become if you stopped trying to fit into roles that keep you small? You don't need to leap, just begin. One breath. One new thought. One brave conversation. Because one small act of alignment can ripple through your entire field and unlock energy that's been waiting to return to you. And once you do, you'll notice something miraculous. The universe always meets you at the level of your willingness. Not perfection. Not mastery. Just truth. So today, Leo, make yourself one quiet promise. To believe the subtle signs. To listen when your heart says, go. To pause when your soul whispers, wait. And above all, to honor your own timing, because timing isn't just fate, it's cooperation with your own awakening. If something I've shared today landed with you, if it echoed something your spirit already knew, take a moment to affirm that by writing in the comments below, I'm ready to step into the strongest version of myself. That one sentence can shift something. Not because it's magic, but because you are, when you decide to show up fully for your own journey. And if you felt a spark today, if this video reminded you of your light, or simply made you feel seen, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell, so you don't miss the next message that's meant for you. I read every comment. And every time you engage, you're not just supporting this channel, you're expanding the reach of messages that were created to guide, to heal, to empower. Thank you for your presence. Your time is sacred, and I don't take it lightly. You chose to be here. You chose to listen. And I believe, in ways bigger than we can explain, the universe is smiling on you for that choice. Now, what will you choose to do with the version of you that just woke up?